and you want to turn to page, please turn to page 655. We're going to go over chapter 14, but we're going to do it fairly quickly. You will not, again, I'm not sure if I'm going to give you any kind of test on this at all. All right. But I mentioned to you before, I said it out loud, this book is on file, or this chapter is on files and streams. There's two ways to make data persist in a program. You either save it to a database or you save it to a file. All right. This chapter is about files. If there's one thing I don't like about this book, it's the fact that the author does not have a chapter on databases. That's why I'm doing my own stuff after the break. All right. But if you look in here, then this chapter is filled with examples. It is very well written. She talks about files, the file class and the directory class, file data organization, the idea of streams as data is flowing through the system, how to both write to and read from a text file. Hopefully you all realize this, that if I take this file, any file, all right, for example, if I come back to here, and I get onto my desk, or onto the desktop here, if I can close a few of these. All right, so if I come through here and I take this file, which is a Microsoft Word file, and I try to open it up, with Notepad, it looks like garbage. Why? Because it's a binary file. It's not a text file. This chapter talks about how you can save files as text files. So they'd be a .txt file. That's what the whole chapter is about. There is a little bit of hardware in here, as the students will tell you. Not a hardware guy. I'll give you what I can from here. The difference between sequential access and what's called random access. Again, I'm kind of dating myself here. I used to be able to give this lecture and everybody get it, but now maybe not so much anymore. But back in the olden days, like in the 2000s, when you had like a cassette player, and if I wanted to listen to song number 8, what did I have to do? I had to either fast forward through the first 7 or listen to the first 7. All right? As opposed to if I've got a CD player and I want song 8, I can just push that button and boom, I go there. All right? Well, using something older, more old-fashioned like that, that's sequential access, where you just go from one to the other. Using something that's newer, so to speak, like a CD, that's what's called random access. This chapter concentrates almost solely on sequential access. And you might say, well, why would it do that? Well, the main reason is the majority of applications that are out there written in C# are things like payroll applications. They're done sequentially, one after the other. All right, so there's still a lot of stuff that's being done in here with sequential access. And the chapter ends by talking about serialization and deserialization. All right, again, don't want to go through a lot of hardware with you. Hopefully you all know, if I said, for example, what kind of a computer do you have? You could all either tell me or at least look at it and tell me. All right, if I'd say, how big's the hard drive? You may know, you may not know. If I said, how much RAM does it have? You may know or you may not know. All right, but the thing about RAM is volatile, which means that it's subject to electronic current, which means that whatever's in RAM goes away if the power goes away on the computer. That used to be if the computer was unplugged. But with the advances in batteries and stuff over the years, that's not typically the case. I know yesterday I was in the middle of producing one of my videos for the afternoon class. It was time to leave. For some reason, it was taking a really, really long time. And so I just shut the top here, let the computer go to sleep. It was at about 80% when I got home. And then last night when I opened it back up again at 7 o'clock, it was still at 80%. But it was still there and working. All right, that's not RAM. All right. So again, I already mentioned to you the distinction between a text file and a binary file. All right, and they go in here and they talk about what is a byte, what is a kilobyte, etc. If you're more into that stuff, if you're more into working with the hardware, you really should be going and going through your next Shadow Attack, go to the one next door. All right, and it's interesting because in that program, everybody who's in that program takes the same classes in the first year. Then in the second year, The people who are in here, they learn what's called Cisco certifications. The people in there learn Microsoft certification. Okay? All right. What we're concerned with, though, is reading from a file and writing to a file. All right. When you read from a file, basically what you want to do is you want to take what's in the file, copy it into RAM, and bring it into your computer. All right. When you write to a file, you want to make sure that you write it from your program and it goes to a computer file. All right. That whole word persistence there, that's what I mentioned to you earlier. Okay. Again, there shouldn't be anything new when we talk about that. All right. So they talk in here about some of the stuff that you can do when you work with files. Most of this should make sense when you take a look at it. One thing to realize, when you create a brand new file, and if you call the create like this, or the create text, if a file already exists by that name, it's overridden. Did you hear what I said? Even if it's a file that's humongous, that's millions of bytes, if you tell it to create a new file and Jesse just puts his name in it, that file, the earlier file is gone. All right? And it's been replaced by the new file. You can keep that from happening, but by default, that's the way that it is. All right? You can check first to see if a file by that name already exists, and if it does, then you give it a new name. All right? And there's different things that you can do. Find out when the file was created, the last time it was accessed, the last time it was written to. So they've got a simple program in here that goes through this, and if you don't, that's the whole program. So literally, it's small, and when you look at it, you give it the name of a file, and if it doesn't exist, it says that, and if it does exist, it gives you the information about it. Does that make sense? All right, it's pretty simple the way that it's written. All right, a lot of the stuff that you do like this for files, we do application programming in here. We write applications. The other type of programming that's typically done is things like operating systems programming, etc. We don't do any of that in here. All right, we do application stuff, but a lot of this stuff would be more on the operating system side. All right, not only can you do things with files, you can do things with directories. Many of these look similar to what you just saw. And in fact, they've got a program that it's on the bottom of this page right here, and it's on the top of the next page. Literally, it's about 20 or 30 lines long. And now what you can do is you can put in the name of a directory. And if it doesn't exist, it'll tell you so. And if it does exist, it'll go and iterate its way through the directory and show you all of the files that are in there. Okay? All right. This right here is almost what we're going to go into with the database part of the class. Okay? And I'm going to give you a couple real quick little definitions I'll put off to the side here. But I think many of these you already know. If I asked you, what's a character? I mean, you can give a lot of definitions for it. But the one that we're concerned with in here is basically any keyboard character. All right. So, you know, it could be something as simple as a single character. I ask your middle initial. All right. It's L. You say L. Boom. That's it. All right. Then, if you take one or more related characters and you put them together, you get what's called a field. All right. You've all filled out forms either online or in a doctor's office or whatever, where there's a, you know, they give you a piece of paper or the computer and they say first name. Boom, you put that in there. What is first name? It's a first name field. What does it consist of? One or more characters. All right. Then if we take and move up the hierarchy, so to speak, you've got a record, and that's one or more related fields. Now, I'm not going to show you this, but I can go into inside Rankin, and I've got information about everyone who's in this class. I've got all, you know, I've got their first name, middle initial, last name. I've got their student number, etc. And I have, for this class, there's 8 in the class, so I've got 8 records, one for each student. All right. Now, what they say then is if you put all these records together, you get a file. And that's true, but what we're going to be doing, after the break is we're going to be creating a database So we call it a table. So a table is one or more related records. So I could have a table in here that, for example, that I call AWD1100 students, and it would have everybody in here. I could have another one that was called AWD1112 students, which is my afternoon class, and I've got 10 in there. Okay, that type of an idea. Here they call it a file, but we're going to call it a database, or a table rather. So a database is just one or more related tables. Now that's what we're going to be doing after the break, all right? And again, this will culminate pretty much at the end. We will write one more C# thing as a class. And what we'll do is instead of something like Joe's that we've been doing, where you have to enter the information, you'll bring it up, you'll have written the database for it, and what you'll have in C# is it'll immediately bring up, whatever record you want, all right? And you'll be able to put in find operations where, you might have 25 different customers. You can find a particular customer, you can add a new customer, you can modify an existing customer, or you can delete an existing customer. That's what we're going to be moving towards. So that's their definitions. There's field, record. All right, I already mentioned sequential access, etc. One thing about files, all right, when you work with a computer file, when you don't need it anymore, you should close it. Now, if you run an application and you forget to close it, it gets closed when the application ends. It automatically gets closed. But as an example, and I'm not making this up, the school that I used to work at in Wisconsin, they had a program where they taught people to work on power lines, and they literally had power lines. They had the big poles and everything right on the campus. But also they had an area in there where students could practice using backhoes and digging and stuff. And usually once a semester, somebody would hit the line that Charter had coming into the school, and it would go down. And you'd know because, bam, immediately your internet connection would go, etc., that kind of thing. Well, the reason I'm telling you that is typically if you have a file open and you get a power hit, all right, it's possible that file could be corrupted. You could lose it or whatever. So the idea is you open a file, you do the work on it. When you don't need it anymore, you close it. That's especially important if, let's say that we were all using the same file that was on a mainframe or a bigger computer. All right. The idea is we'd only have it open as long as we needed it, and then we'd close it. All right. Next, they talk about streams here, and again, sometimes this is even referred to as a Firehose. So this is basically, they call it a file stream, but in essence, this is a computer application. So imagine water is coming through here. That's your input. That water will be manipulated. That's what your application does. And then the water will flow out, and that's your output. All right, that's exactly what they're talking about here. Now, what we've done so far is you have created the input yourselves. All right, and you'll click a button and boom, you'll do some manipulation and you'll get some output. But what they're talking about doing now is using files for that. And when you do that, okay, notice it says their console.in refers to the standard input stream object. All right, by default, that's your keyboard. But you can change console.in, so instead of coming from a keyboard, it comes from a file. All right. And we've got console.out, which by default is your screen. You can change that, so by default, you push it off to a file. All right. And you've got console.error, which by default, again, is your screen. Okay. And why is that stuff important? There are still jobs out there where you have people who literally go around and their job is to look at a bunch of monitors that are running different applications. And if there's a problem, they have to immediately let people know. Okay, literally that's their job. They're computer operators. Okay, but it used to be that you have all these running, but what if two things go wrong on different monitors at once? You might see one of them and not see the other one, and it scrolls off the screen. So you can write that output, any error output, you can write that to a file also. All right, so any of these are changeable is what the author is saying here. All right. I'm not going to go into this stuff, can read. A lot of the stuff just makes sense. If you have read capability on a file, can read would be true. All right. If you can iterate your way through the file, can seek would be true. If you can write to a file, etc. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with it. This is what I mentioned to you before. Create, notice, creates a new file. If the file already exists, it's overridden. All right, so it'll be gone. You can do a create new, which creates a new file, but if a file by that name already exists, it throws an exception. An exception is an error type of condition. All right, and there's other things that you can do also. So these are typically the operations that you use on a file. You can read from a file, you can write to a file, and you can use the same file both to be read from and written to. All right, so those are your basic operations right there. And again, they've got some programs that are in here. I didn't think they were particularly good or particularly bad, to be honest with you. They're okay. All right, so if you run this program, it's called Write Some Text. You enter some text, you hit enter, and it writes it to a file. That's all it does. Most people, to be honest with you, kind of hate working with files. They're like, can't we just get into databases and do good stuff? All right, and that's why we're going to do that after the break. I already mentioned sequential access, and I gave you the idea that it's one after the other. All right, so they show you here how to write data to a sequential access file. Let's take a look at the program example that they have here. All right, so you come in here and you create a file. This is just going to say that the name of the file is going to be employeedata.txt. All right, you come in here and you create a new employee. You run the program. You ask some information. You ask for an employee number, you put that in. You ask for an employee last name, you put that in. You ask for an employee salary, you put that in. So you notice, then we write it out. That's what the whole thing is. All right? So that's an example of you inputting information, but after you've inputted it, all right, then you are able to write it to a file, so you're able to then use that file. So this file right now would be an output file. If you used it again, you could bring it into your program and use it as an input file. All right. The majority of the work that with most programmers that do any kind of work is what they end up doing is they'll have some kind of a data entry person who will typically create files for them. If you're a programmer, you don't want to spend your time keying in stuff. All right. I'm not talking about programs. I'm talking about keying in data files. That's not your job. Somebody else will do that for you. It will have been done already. So after they do that, they go and they read from that file, and then they write it out and they format it so it looks a little nicer than it did before. So when they first created the file, it was an input file. All right. Then they created it, okay, and then they used it as input into a program and then created an output file. All right. And again, as mentioned, it is also possible for you to use the same file as both input and output. One of the things that I like about this book, and I don't know if the students agree or not, is the fact that in every chapter they have these you do it's. So if you're having problems with anything, they give you examples and they literally tell you, they walk you through everything. And in here they have you create a file with a bunch of names in it. That's it. And then when you're done, boom, it shows you the file that you created. Then once you've done that, they say, now let's open that file and display it. And you'll notice what they added to it was they said, let's just give them line numbers. And then later on in here, they set it up so that you're able to say, hey, does Franny exist in this file? And it'll either come back and show you the information about Franny, or it'll say Franny does not exist in this file. That's the search stuff. When you search, by default, it starts at the beginning. All right, where you currently are, as in what current is. When you reach the end, that's end. Again, people say, well, why are you telling us that? It just makes sense, yeah? So this was that example where you could come in here. So in this example, we're saying, show me everyone who makes over 50 grand a year. And it shows them to you. Show me everyone who makes over 55. So you notice now that Lorenzo is gone, but Santini is still there. All right? Show me anybody with a minimum salary of 0. Well, that'll give you everybody, Davis, Lorenzo, and Santini, but you notice that Davis is not in the first two. Another one of these, you do it so they work with that same file that we just worked with. And now you're able to come in here and search and do different work. You've got a whole list of names in here, and you can print them all out, but you can tell it where you want it to start, etc. All right, and the last thing that's discussed in the chapter, like I said, it wouldn't be a long lecture, is serialization and deserialization. All right, the idea, and again, whether you're just in here visiting or whether you're a student in the class, this should make sense to all of you, that when you send information, basically online, I don't know how it's traveling through the air or whatever, you can only send so much information at a time. I wouldn't be able to send a file with 1 billion records in it and have it go like that. It just wouldn't happen. What happens is, when you do this, is stuff gets serialized and deserialized. All right, and what does that mean? Well, let's take a look here. It says C# provides a technique called serialization that can be used for writing objects and reading objects. Serialization converts objects into a stream of bytes. Deserialization reverses it. So imagine I had a house, and I decided that my house that I still have in Rockton, Illinois, I wanted to move it out here. And I'd love to be able to do that, because the one I'm going to end up buying is going to be more money, but it's not going to be as good a house as I have right now. But imagine if I could take it apart brick by brick, all right, and literally just take all the siding off, take everything out. That would be serializing it. Then if I brought it back here and bought a lot and put it all together again, that would be deserializing. All right, but the thing is, when you start to do complex applications like this, where you've got employees, and this has only got 3 fields in it: an employee number, a name, and a salary. But imagine we had 50 fields in it. First name, middle initial, last name, address, city, state, zip, etc. So imagine we had all that stuff in it. All right, and the idea is we're not going to be able to send it over the wire, all that stuff at one time. So we have to serialize it, which means break it up into chunks, send those chunks over, and then on the other end, put those chunks back together again into a whole. That's the deserialization. All right. And it's actually a fairly long-winded example at the end here when they do this. All right. And it's about 7 or 8 pages long. That's pretty much it for the chapter. All right. As we always do, let's turn to the end of the chapter, even though I'm not going to test you on this. All right. Still, if you would, please turn up to page 699 in your book, just for completeness sake, so that you have all of this stuff. All right, so on 699, they start with the review. Number 1, random access memory. We just went over this. It's volatile. Again, it's subject to electronic current. So number 1 would be B, volatile. Number 2, a collection of data stored on a non-volatile device. In other words, if you want it to persist, is also B. It would be a computer file. So number 1 and 2 are both B. Number 3, which of the following is not a permanent type of storage? The answer is RAM. Again, RAM, A, is an acronym that stands for Random Access Memory. All right. Number 4, when you store data in a computer file on a persistent storage device, you're writing it. All right. As opposed to grabbing stuff that's already on the device where you'd be reading it. All right. Number 5, which of the following is not a method of the file class? And it is D, end. Number 6, in the data hierarchy, a group of characters that has some meaning. You can see it on the board there, 1 or more related characters. So the answer would be, for 6, B, it's a field. Number 7, when each record in a file is stored in order based on some field, the file is in D, sequential order, or it's a sequential access file. So for that first page, it's B, B, A, C, D, B, D. Turning the page, going on here to page 700. Number 8, a channel through which data flows. Again, the key word there is flows. It's a stream. All right, so the answer is C. Number 9, which of the following is not part of the file stream constructor? The answer is A, the file size. Number 10, when the file mode is create, all right, a new file is created even if one by the same name already exists. So number 10 is A. Number 11, which of the following is not a file stream property? The answer is B, can exist. Number 12, which of the following is not a file access enumeration? The answer is C. There is read, there is write, and there is read-write. There is not one that's called write-read. Number 13, a character used to specify the boundary between data items and text files is known as C, a delimiter. Number 14, what character can be used to specify a boundary between characters? The answer is C. You can use a comma, you can use a semicolon, and there's other things you can use as well. So for page 700, starting with number 8, the answers were C, A, B, C, C, C. Number 15, after a stream reader has been created, the read line method can be used to A, it retrieves a line at a time from the file. So number 15 is A. Number 16, the argument to the string split class method is C, the character that identifies a new field in the string. Number 17, the class split method, all right. The answer there is it stores the results in B, an array of strings. Number 18, a file's, again it's B, position pointer, holds the byte number of the next byte to be read. Number 19, the process of converting objects into streams is D, serialization. And number 20, what can you serialize? You can do any of these. So the answer is D, all of the above. So for page 701, it is A, C, B, B, D, D. Any questions on any of that? All right, then let's take a break. It's 9:33. Let's come back at 9:45. All right, and we'll just take it from there. Again, I'm going to ask that you try to make yourselves open and available to our visitors. So if they just want to walk around and see what you're working on. Andrew, I was going to bring yours in. Do you by any chance on your machine have a copy of the website that you created?
Yeah, I've got it on.
Okay, maybe you can, after the break.
Yeah, do you have like a drive or something on the on? Or?
Yeah, that'd be great if you don't mind. Do that. Thank you. What I did is my oldest daughter is one of the reasons I moved down here. She lives down here in St. Charles, and she's got an 8-month-old daughter and a fiance, and she's getting married in October. So what my counterpart in St. Louis did, he's getting married in May. So he had his students, what is it? Evan and Jenny G, something like that. Is that it? Yep. That's him. That's Evan. So he had his class build a website. All right. And they could use different, do it in different ways. So there's the ceremony and reception stuff. There's their story. There's their travel and accommodations. So people who are coming there. And there was an RSVP and a gift registry. So I thought, you know what? I was looking for something to do. Talked to him about it. He said that the students really liked it and they felt they got something out of it. So I gave them some specs for my daughter. All right. And what I did was I wanted to be, I wanted my daughter to pick the one she liked the most. So I had nothing involved in it. And I don't normally do this, but I said to Evan, what'd you do with the winner? So I gave him $100. Ooh, that was kind of steep. But I gave him $100. So the day that we did it, that I announced it, I got pizzas in here, and we brought pizzas in. But then I announced it, and Andrew, he'll show you his afterwards. The only problem with it is my daughter's fiance. He's a great guy, but he's a procrastinator. He hasn't given his story. He hasn't given the people who are going to be in the wedding party. So there's a lot of stuff missing in there right now. And I want to put it out there on the internet because there's a lot of people from Wisconsin who are going to be coming to the wedding, and that way they could see different things about it. But until he gives me that, she doesn't want it put out there in a half-done format. So I said, okay, I'll agree to your wishes. But, I mean, that's just an example again. Now, last week, I had a group of high school students in, junior high school students in. And let's see if I still have that. I showed them another product that's similar to the one that you just saw. I got to find it, so. And what we did was basically, for lack of better words, it was kind of a drag and drop type of website thing. I think this is it. And again, it's not that this is fantastic. It's not at all. But literally what we did was we came through there and we built this in about 10 minutes. All right. And it was good that it didn't take that long, because one group was supposed to be here from 8:30 until 9:15. Then the other group from 9:15 until 10 o'clock. Well, the 8:30 group didn't get here till almost 9 o'clock. All right, because they had a meeting in the other room that ran long. But I just showed them, and again, like I said, this is all drag and drop type of stuff. So I went out and found some what I thought were nice looking, pictures that would show pretty well on screen. And you'll notice, I put this in here too. This is just a product that's free. It's called mobirise.com. So when the students go in and they do their portfolios, they can either use Mobirise, or they can use Bootstrap, or they can just do it totally from scratch and use HTML and CSS, etc. This ends up being 10% of their grade. So if somebody doesn't do it, and if they've got an A, that's going to push them down. The school does there's a B plus and a C plus. So you can get an A, a B plus, a B, a C plus, or an F. If you do D work, it's considered failure here. And the failure is anything less than 75%. All right. And again, I don't make those rules. I just have to abide by them. You can see this too. Maybe you heard this. I don't know if you talked to anybody first. There are certain dress rules here. For instance, we all wear the Rankin shirts. You can't wear jeans. You can't wear tennis shoes. If you're a guy, you have to shave. Or, I don't know if this isn't shaving, but the point is I couldn't have something that looked like this. Actually, the way this grows, I couldn't have something that looked like that anyway. For women, if you have earrings, studs, you can wear a ring, you can wear a bracelet, but for guys aren't allowed to have, they can't wear any jewelry on their face, etc. And women, if you come in here and you've got a nose ring on, they'll make you remove it. And I mean, I'm a little bit more liberal. The school that I worked at had no dress code. There were guys that would walk in there that we'd have to have them leave because people would walk in without shirts on. And usually it's the kind of people that are 300 pounds that you don't want to see without a shirt. All right. Women would walk in there without bras, and sometimes very big women, etc. And occasionally somebody would have to go in there and tell them that. But other than that, people would walk in with ripped clothes and whatever. Tennis shoes all the time. I didn't even have any dress code. I never wore jeans while I was there because I just didn't think it was right. I dressed more or less like this all the time. But there are certain rules that you're meant to follow. Again, I don't know how much of this you may or may not have been told. This class meets 5 times a week. So you're allowed 6 absences for the entire semester. And once you get the 4th absence, I have to fill out a piece of paper that says, I have now talked with Evan. He's missed 4 times. He knows it. He signs it. If he misses it again, he's got to go and talk to Mr. Corrigan because he's the department chair. If he misses again, he's got to go over to the other building and talk to Mr. Sutton, who you may or may not have met. He's the site director. He's in charge of the whole campus. And if you miss again, that's 7 times. technically I'm within my rights. I can just kick you out. I don't like to do that. So what I typically do is I'll tell the other instructors, we all get together in the conference room that's right here, and I say, hey, Josh has missed 7 times, but he had a lot of family problems that he had to, had to work with, etc. Can we give him one more day? And so then that's what they'll do. Thank you. And they count tardies, etc. And they're almost always changing the way that this stuff works. So, if you were to come here in fall, and I hope you do, but if you did come here in fall, they may have some new rules by that time. All right? There we go. All right, so this is, Andrew, that you see right there. This is the one that he ended up building. That's my daughter. That's her fiance. And you can work your way through here. And one of the reasons that she picked his is you can see he put his own background. He put his own theme in there. She really liked that. She thought it looked very professional. All right. And as you work your way through, ceremony and reception. Again, I don't know if you're from around here or not. I would guess you probably are. But it's going to be at Bogey Hills. And if you don't know about it, it burned down a year or two ago, and they're rebuilding it right now. So that is the schematic, and I guess it's mostly up. I haven't been there lately. All right, and I don't know if that was actually from there, if you just grabbed something else. It was? Okay. And there's a map to it. All right, our story. Well, now it's just a humongous thing of pictures, etc., because Taylor's provided me almost nothing. All right. Accommodations. Eventually, we'll have to come in here and change this. I don't know why they're both going to that one. But some stuff on the St. Louis area. For accommodations, they have actually picked out their hotel now. But as you can see right now, there's just a bunch of pictures in here. All right. The RSVP, again, there is a reserve the seat. All right. I just made those up. I have no idea if she is registered, etc. But that's the kind of thing he was able to do. All right. And I think we did that about that was their midterm. And it wasn't that, okay, you got 4 hours, make this. I gave them a week. And every time they get any kind of an assignment, they know what the point value is, and they know the rubric for it. That, you had to, at a minimum, you had to create 4 pages. All right, that might have been worth 10 points out of 100, etc. That kind of thing. Now, any questions? Anything? Okay. So what I'm going to say is, if you want to, feel free to walk around for a bit and just ask people, can you show me examples of your work, etc. And I'm just going to step out for a minute just to use the facilities, but I'll be back in 5 minutes. You can ask them anything you want. If you're going to say, well, what kind of guy is he, then it probably shouldn't be here. But they just literally, before class, they just printed out these. Let's see, I think it's in here. It's not in there. So they printed out these right before class. What happens is at the end of every semester, they do course evaluations. I have to leave the room for about a half an hour. They do them online. They're totally anonymous. Well, the bad thing about doing that is they're done at the end of the class. So if you have a problem with the way I taught the class is over already. You don't really get a chance to tell me that you had a problem. So what I've done is this is my own thing that I made. It's got 9 questions on it. The course content was consistent with the description, etc., and a bunch of other stuff. And if you totally agree with that, you'd put a 5 here. All right, you can come in here, you can just put in your own numbers, etc. And then, what was most helpful. And I had them do that, and I emailed a copy of that to everybody yesterday. And then I asked them, and they're over here right now. They printed them out. All right, I left while they were working on them, etc., because I believe in it being anonymous. At the school I used to work at, there literally was a guy. He'd been there forever, and what you had to do course evaluations. That was what was in our contract. You have to do course evaluations, but that's all it said. So what he would do is you would do course evaluations. He would go and you'd have to give them right to him, and he'd look at it, look at you, and if he liked it, he'd put it in one pile. If he didn't like it, he'd put it in the other pile. I'm not making this up. Then at the end of class, he would take the pile of the ones that didn't like him and he'd throw them out. To me, I don't know what you're supposed to be learning from that. I want this to be totally anonymous. I want people to feel like they can talk and tell me if they say, I didn't like this. We're getting too much homework. We're not, believe it or not, 2 people yesterday in the afternoon class put, I wish we had more homework in this class. You don't normally find a lot of that, but they did. And I've told the class here, not to be funny, it's not a joke, but there's certain things I can't change. Somebody says, I hate your voice. I don't know what I'm going to be able to do about that. I hate the fact that you're just about bald. So do I. But there's, I'm not buying a toupee, and other than that, there's not a whole lot I can do about that. All right. I've had people do that. I had at the old school I was at, there was a person every semester. All I know is that they said the same thing every semester, so I would take it was the same person. I hate his bitchy voice. They put that down every semester. I didn't know it was a bitchy voice, but evidently it was. All right. So they'd always put that down. Again, one of these, because to me this was the most biting comment somebody could give. There was a question like that, and they wrote down, the course is fine, exactly the way it is. All it needs is a different instructor. And when you think about it, there's not anything more biting you can say about it than that. You know what I mean? Because you're saying it isn't the course, it's just the person teaching the course. But I want them to be honest. And I'll read those a little bit later. All right. In fact, I'm not going to read them today because we've got one person missing, and I'm going to wait until Anthony will be back probably tomorrow, and he runs his off, and then I'll put them all together. I don't want it where I would know that that's his. I had one student yesterday, they were having problems for some reason, and I think that it was a non-edit mode, so they couldn't write anything. So they printed out and hand wrote everything. That kind of defeated the purpose. The good news is I don't know how anyone in the class writes. I've never seen their cursive abilities, so I don't know who it is. And to be honest with you, I don't care. The comments in there were by and large, they were, everything in there. The reviews were positive. A couple people wrote down, like I said, more homework. A couple people wrote down, I wish that when you introduce a new topic, we'd always do a program first before you even talk about it. And then you'd go and lecture on it. Other people have said, if you did a program first before you lecture on it, I'd be totally confused. So there's no way to make everybody happy, And pardon me if I don't want to say this and have this sound offensive to you, but I took a class once, and the guy who taught the class, you've heard of the word consensus, all right? He said that his definition for consensus is if he decides on something, and let's say there's a room like this, and everybody in the class is equally pissed off, that's consensus. It's not that some people are happy and some are sad, but that everybody feels, wow, we could have done better than that. All right. Then basically, it's kind of like I watch old episodes of Law and Order when the judge says, somebody says, we want this thrown out. And the judge says, okay, I'll throw that out. And now one attorney's happy, and the other one says, yeah, but I want this put in. The judge says, okay, I'll put that in. And now that guy's happy, and the other guy's upset. And they're both mad, and they're both happy. And the judge said, gee, I think I just did my job. That's kind of what we shoot for in here. Because no matter how fast I teach certain classes, I'm going too fast for some people. I'm going too slow for others. I've got a student in the other room. He has, I'm not even going to get into it with you, but he has a medical condition, and it makes it hard for him to do a lot of things that the rest of the class can do. So he holds up the class. They've gotten used to it, but at the same time, I have introduced him to typing tutors and other things where he's gotten much better than he was. And the class does a really good job, but at the same time, I'll sometimes tell him, hey, we got to go on. That's one of the reasons I tape my lectures. So if you fall behind, you're going to have to watch the tape. That's the best that I can do for you. All right? So like I said, if you want to walk around and the other people will be back in just a couple minutes, you're welcome to stay as long as you want to stay. You're welcome to leave when you think you've had enough. When I had one of these shadow attacks last month, there was one student. He got here at about 8:30 and he left around 10:30. And I've had other ones that have stayed the entire time. I had one guy, we did an activity as a class, we got done, he goes, okay, thanks, and he left. So it's not my goal in here to try to strap you down to a chair. You've got my information that's on there. If you do have any questions afterwards, please feel free to send me an email, give me a call. Much easier. A bunch of us share phones in our office. So it's much easier to email me. If you want to hear back from me faster, email me, don't call me. Okay? All right. Like I said, if you want to talk to any of them, feel free to do so.
You need to download that stuff you had us pull up earlier.
Okay, the question was, do we need to download that stuff? The answer is, we're going to do it as a class, probably after the break.
Should we
So
just have it on the
if you want to do it already, you can, but you don't have to.